Hi! We're going to be telling you a little bit about the process known as ocean acidification.
Ocean acidification, to say the least, is pretty harmful to the organisms it comes in contact with. Ocean acidification started with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when those pesky humans started releasing more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The ocean, which covers over 75% of the planet, absorbs about a quarter of the carbon dioxide humans release into the atmosphere every year.
Naturally, when the CO2 levels in the atmosphere increase, the ocean's CO2 levels increase as well. At first, this did not seem like a bad thing because of the decreasing amount of this greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. But after a few decades of this process happening, it is obvious that there's a downside too. The carbon dioxide absorbed by the ocean is in turn raising the pH levels in the ocean and changing the chemistry of the seawater.
So, what's the box jellyfish, and what the heck does it have to do with ocean acidification?
This is Sydney, the box jellyfish. Sydney's Latin name is Chironix fleckeri. He is one of the most potently poisonous animals in the world. He can kill a full-grown adult in less than 5 minutes with only one sting. Sydney lives in the Indo-Pacific Ocean and in the oceans surrounding northern Australia. Sydney's bell is about the size of a basketball. He is very proud of the fact that he is the largest species of the box jellyfish family.
Box jellyfish like Sydney are very dangerous because they have a high concentration of cnidocytes, or stinging cells, on their many tentacles. If you can count, Sydney has 15 tentacles on the four corners of his bell, varying length from 1 to 3 meters. The species preys on prawns and small fish and can move incredibly fast, at up to 21 meters per minute, 46 flipping miles per hour.
Sydney also has a whopping 24 eyes that actually help him detect movement, obstacles, and even help him remember prey. This is very unique for that box jellyfish, and even the Chironix fleckeri in particular, because jellyfish do not have central nervous systems, mystifying scientists as to how Chironix fleckeri like Sydney can process information. In one amazing study, a single box jellyfish was put in a tank. 2 black poles were placed into the tank. The jellyfish seemed aware of them and swam around them in a figure eight, so as to avoid running into them and knocking them over. To test the specimen's color vision, a single red pole was stood in the tank. When the jellyfish apparently became aware of the object in its tank, it seemed repelled by it and remained at the far edge of the tank. This seemed to prove the Chironix fleckeri's supreme intelligence.
The Chironix fleckeri also undergoes a unique and quite amazing life cycle. First, full-grown adult jellyfish, called medusas, release eggs and sperm directly into the ocean. The eggs are fertilized by the sperm. This fertilized zygote is known as a planula. A larva forms from the planula when it attaches to a hard surface. Then, the larva develops into a polyp, which resembles a sea anemone. During the polyp stage, the jellyfish asexually reproduces for 3 to 4 months before the polyp elongates and buds off into many young jellyfish. These young jellyfish are called ephira. Finally, the ephira mature into full-grown medusas, and then the cycle begins again.
Box jellyfish are important parts of aquatic ecosystems. This is exemplified by our food web. In this food web, the Chironix fleckeri is a secondary or tertiary consumer. Plants and protists are the main primary producers, seaweed and algae specifically. Zooplankton are an example of primary consumers, feeding on algae and some other protists and plants. Krill feed on both zooplankton and plants, making them both primary and secondary consumers.
Different sized fish represent primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers of the food web, preying on plankton, krill, and other small fish. The box jellyfish resides in the middle of the food web, or close to the top. It feeds on krill, shrimp, and prawns, as well as the smaller fish on the lower end of the food web, like the stripe-eyed surgeonfish. Finally, certain types of sharks and sea turtles represent tertiary or even quaternary consumers.
Box jellyfish are heterotrophic, meaning they get energy from consuming other organisms like fish and crustaceans, or even through photosynthetic bacteria that live inside them.
So, how are the jellyfish being affected by ocean acidification?
They are overpopulating the oceans. Oxygen is created by plants using photosynthesis, and high oxygen levels allow fish and other complex creatures to compete successfully with jellyfish. However, the oxygen in water can be depleted far more quickly than it can be replaced, and due to ocean acidification, carbon dioxide is taking over.
Where humans add nutrients to seawater, such as fertilizer runoff from farms, and where oceans become more full of carbon dioxide than with oxygen, areas known as eutrophied zones form. They can occur naturally, but are spreading quickly as the oceans become filled with excess carbon dioxide, phosphorus, and nitrogen derived from a variety of agricultural and industrial human activities and human-induced pollution.
Eutrophied zones have spread to a frightening extent, and they appear to be permanent. The jellyfish thrive in these areas as their natural competitors are no longer able to keep them in check, and as they do not need oxygen to survive.
The jellyfish's habitat and both their fundamental and realized niches are expanding, meaning trouble for the ecosystem balance and all organisms involved in ecosystems and food webs with the jellyfish. They have little competition for food and little that will eat them. For example, sea turtles, one of the box jelly's only natural predators, are straying away from previous habitats that kept the jellyfish from overtaking ecosystems due to an overabundance of carbon dioxide and a lack of oxygen in the areas they used to inhabit.
Long term, these changes might become permanent, as it is extremely difficult to reinstitute natural predators into an acidified area, and it is also difficult to reverse ocean acidification.
So, how can we fix this problem and keep the jellyfish apocalypse from dawning?
In order to limit ocean acidification and hopefully stop the damage, we can limit our use of fossil fuels and instead use greener, more renewable sources of energy. One of these energy sources is solar power.
The most common form of solar power is found in photovoltaic cells, the solar panels that we see every day. Photovoltaic cells are made of semiconductive materials such as silicon or germanium because they have a higher resistance than metals and yet a lower resistance than insulators.
Photovoltaic cells look something like this.
Layer A is called the encapsulant, made of glass or other clear materials such as plastic, and it seals the cell from the external environment.
Layer B is the contact grid and is made of a good conductor such as a metal, and it serves as a conductive electrode.
Layer C is the anti-reflective coating. Through a combination of a favorable refractive index and thickness, this layer serves to guide light into the solar cell. Without this layer, much of the light would simply bounce off the surface.
Layer D is made of N-type silicon and is created by contaminating the silicon with compounds that contain one more valence electron than silicon does, such as with either phosphorus or arsenic. Since only 4 electrons are required to bond with the 4 adjacent silicon atoms, the 5th valence electron is available for conduction.
Layer E is made of P-type silicon and is created by doping with compounds containing less valence electrons than silicon does, such as boron. When silicon, with 4 valence electrons, is doped with atoms that have 1 less valence electron, 3 valence electrons, only 3 electrons are available for bonding with 4 adjacent silicon atoms, therefore creating an incomplete bond, or a hole, that exists which can attract electrons from nearby atoms. Filling one hole creates another hole in a different silicon atom. The movement of these holes is available for conduction.
Layer F is the back contact, made out of a metal, covers the entire back surface of the solar cell and acts as a conductor.
When UV rays hit the cells, they free electrons from their host atoms, and the knocked free electrons move through the cell, generating electricity. Another, larger-scale method is found in solar thermal power plants. Heat is concentrated in a small area through various methods, which is then used to boil water. In one of these methods, long U-shaped containers with mirrors lining the interior focus sunlight on a pipe of oil that runs through the middle. The hot oil is then used to boil water, and the boiling water then turns a steam turbine, which produces electricity of a large enough quantity to supply thousands of people. Other technologies that utilize solar energy are passive, or do not require active factories, turbines, or similar industrialization. One example of this is in buildings with big windows. These allow UV rays of sunlight to penetrate heat-absorbent materials on the floor and walls during the daylight hours, which then release the heat at night to keep the building warm. Another example is special absorbent plates on a home roof that can heat liquid in the house's hot water pipes.
It would be a very bright choice to start using solar power instead of fossil fuels. For one thing, solar energy exists in abundance and is inexhaustible, which means that it can never be used up. Instead of using up a non-renewable source, why not use a source that can be there forever in theory? Solar power is also pollution-free. What a bargain. You get renewable energy and it doesn't pollute the environment. It's pretty great if you ask me. As well as those pros, solar power is also noise-free and it can adapt to many conditions and situations. The panels can virtually be put anywhere that sunlight reaches, and they can do their job.
Although there are many benefits to using solar power, it has been a heated topic of debate whether it should be used. The biggest reason that solar power isn't being used commercially is because it is very expensive to install and maintain. The installation cost of the average 5 kilowatt system would be around $25,000 to $35,000, and that's only for one area. Also, places that don't get much sunlight would not be the ideal location for solar panels. The sun isn't shining on one spot 24/7. Nighttime and rainy or cloudy days need places to store the energy they have. Overall, even though there is a huge cost and some areas might not be the ideal location, as well as there being a lack of sunlight, in time, the panels would pay for themselves.
So, to stop the imminent death that would surely happen if the jellyfish apocalypse did indeed occur, solar power is the way to go. By reducing our carbon footprint, we can help save the world.